Welcome back everybody to this week's video highlights here on Taking a Breath. Thanks so much for joining us. This week I'm interviewing Raleigh CEO of 321 Coffee, a nonprofit coffee shop in downtown Raleigh for adults with disabilities. She's doing amazing things and is a great example of someone who has partnered her passion with her gifting. And so she shares all about that and the story of 321 Coffee and all that they're doing. Super excited to share this and I hope you enjoy. So what kind of kicked off then, what was that transition point from, student org and kind of like a side project to now, like you guys are a full blown, have your own space, coffee shop, employing people, like where was that shift and kind of what did that look like for you guys?
Yeah, that's a great question because it is crazy to just think of like the different iterations that it's gone through. And
Yeah.
I can remember, so we had the student org, it was great. But at some point, like we really wanted this to turn into something that would last beyond our time at NC State. And there's a reason that student orgs aren't employing people and they aren't signing leases at for real storefronts. It's not
Right.
that structure is not always there. And so that was when we were like, okay, well, we could make this a nonprofit and then we could keep that student org component to keep that tied to the campus, which is what we've done. But we'd also have this nonprofit. And so when we did that, it was still sort of like, oh, I could do this and that'll be fine. Great. So we did the nonprofit. And then all of a sudden, like, I remember having this realization, like, wow, last fall, we took on employees from our baristas. We have 21 paid employees. And I sort of had this realization of like, this is their job. And this is something that they take pride in coming to work every week. And it was just sort of this like crazy thing of this is something that started on like folding tables and rented from Tally Student Union. And now this is like so much more real, so much more significant. And it's beginning, like I personally would love to pursue this after graduation, continue developing that. And this was something that I started, like I said, freshman year, tiny like side project. And so just to have seen that grow into this more significant thing, both for our employees, but even for me. And again, kind of accidental. It's been amazing.
So true for everyone, especially going into college. If you can get connected with those right people who,
Absolutely.
they pour in their experience, like especially, for you guys having that guy you mentioned, who's been working for McDonald's doing all this stuff. It's like you get connected with that like one person and they give you all these insights that, you might not have ever thought of or heard before. And I think that's something that, like, especially as students, a lot of times we're like, well, I know, I feel like I know it, like I'm good. But then you even just have that one insight and you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that I never thought of that before, all that type of stuff. It's crazy.
Absolutely. And I can imagine, like, I think if I had known sort of all of these hurdles that we were going to have to jump over, and like, if I had known everything that I didn't know, I don't know if I would have been as confident in starting because, that's scary. There's a lot there of just red flags and so much to think about, so much to analyze, so many decisions to make that's a hard, like, if you look at that sea of hurdles you have to jump over, that's a scary thing to like run towards.
Right.
But truthfully, like, sort of that ignorance is bliss element, like in starting it and not realizing that, but then crossing them as you go, I think it was really helpful for me to like get the ball rolling because I think once you start, it's easy to keep going. Once you have the foundation set, even if it's not very substantial, our student org was like, that's very easy to create. But then it's just one more step to create the nonprofit. And then it's just one more step to go find your first location.
Heck yeah. So I love, there was one thing that that I heard you say a little bit ago, but I love is that shift from when you realize like, okay, we can't have storefront right now because of high risk, because of that type of stuff, that shift to looking at, making your own beans, doing the subscription service, all of that stuff to me like having that level of creativity of realizing like, okay, well, this isn't working. How can we shift to create something that is going to still bring value, and not only bring value to you guys, right, but creating an additional line that is going to bring value to all these people who, you know, wanted to support you, but don't, maybe they're 45 minutes away, right? Those types of people who still want to support you guys, but they're like, oh my gosh, like, you know, an hour and a half every time round trip, you know, it's a lot. But then, you know, now they can purchase your stuff and have it shipped to them. Like, that's so fantastic. And it gives so much more reach to the work you guys are doing, which is incredible.
Absolutely.
Right? I love that. Oh my
Thank
God.
you. Yeah, it was definitely like, I felt like we were finally getting to the point where I knew what we had to do to get into a storefront. And then I was like, okay, scrap that. Now figure out everything with roasting. I was like, oh gosh, I know none of this, but here we go.
Yeah. And I think so many people would be like, oh my gosh, like I'm stuck, you know, and just kind of, it's that mentality of like passively letting things happen to you versus actively like actively acting on what's coming your way. And I think that that's such a great example of that. So that's super cool. And
Thank
then,
you.
so what is your, like, to kind of follow up on that, like, what is your advice on taking action? Like, I mean, so really, and I'm thinking of it in terms of, you know, first steps for people listening. Like, if people know, you know, they have passion about something and they might be interested, you know, what would your thought be on, you know, how can they really like find what they're interested in and then act on it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it all starts with doing something, and doing something doesn't need to be like founding a new company. But I mean, especially if it's something that you know you're passionate about, I'm sure like, you know, different organizations that exist, you know, different pain points that people are struggling with, and coming up with something that you can tangibly do. And I think even if it's something really small, and that you can just do today, do it, because then tomorrow maybe you can take a little bit larger of a step. And I think that, sort of like I mentioned earlier, like starting that student organization, literally our first event, we rented students tables from the tally, we got coffee from Starbucks, and we just showed up at an event. We're like, hey, can we just serve some free coffee? People are like, absolutely, I love free coffee. Reach out to some friends that I knew that have a disability to see if they were interested in volunteering. They said yes, and we just served coffee one day. Super easy. Literally, like, no logistical difficulty there. And then after we did that, I was like, okay, we should do another event. And maybe this time we don't have to get Starbucks. We'll instead like reach out to a local roaster. And then that local roaster was willing to do like a 3-2-1 blend for us. And now that is like our supplier. You know, just if you have something you're passionate about, I like to think you can come up with a way for you to contribute and a way for you to immerse yourself in that world. And if you're passionate about it, and if it's truly something you love, it doesn't feel like work, and it doesn't feel like stress. And I think that's the key, because then it's just fun to, okay, what can I do next? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do to build on this? What can I do to bring other people in to contribute? And I truly think that that's how any significant commitment, that's the root of it. That's how it can grow.
Thanks so much for watching this week's episode of Taking a Breath. If you're interested in more, make sure to follow us on Instagram at Taking a Breath Podcast. And you can also listen to the full audio version linked below. Have a great week.